Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Captain Morgan. On today's episode, we have another special guest. He is a brute strength coach who has coached multiple CrossFit regional, sanctional, and games athletes. He's been an affiliate owner for 8 years and counting, but most importantly, he's my coach. Please welcome to the show, Todd. Why?
That was a great intro.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Happy to be here. Thank you for your time.
Of course. We'll input some, edit in some cheering.
Some cheering.
Yeah.
Now, your cheering was good. You should just leave your cheering. I liked it.
Coach Todd, wise. But yeah, so I wanted to have you on the show today because as gyms are starting to open back up, I think that the amount of injuries and with Murph happening because it's Memorial Day today, I think the cases of rhabdo are gonna skyrocket as well. And you actually just put out an Instagram post yesterday talking to affiliate owners how to basically have their athletes go through it in the smart way. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so Murph, I've done Murph every year. I'm not going to be doing it this year. We just got a pull-up bar set up for my training space about 4 weeks ago. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I have been doing pull-ups and like ring muscle-ups and bar muscle-ups, and I've done CrossFit since 2011. And I've competed at regionals, but it's just not responsible. And like where I'm at in my fitness, I don't want to incur that type of damage. I think people will come in, jump into Murph, and that's fine, like, and good, and they'll do it, but then they're wrecked until next Sunday. And I don't think that's the point of training. I think a lot of people love the soreness, and there's like that company that's Live Sore. I think that's the name of it.
Yep.
And although that be like cool and like a cultural thing, I think in CrossFit, I don't think it's responsible and appropriate for what we're trying to do, especially on an affiliate level and on a level with athletes who just want to figure out a way to live and create their own personal progressions and create physical culture that's lifelong versus like a games athlete or a competitive athlete. I have a lot of athletes that I coach one-on-one that compete, and I have quite a few people who don't compete, like yourself, who like wanted to compete and then realized like, okay, I want to do this for vitality and longevity. And I have a lot of people that are like that. And there is a line down the center. I feel like it would be cool to have some kind of carryover in the future with people, but I think it's one or the other for right now. And people in the longevity category should just abstain from Murph because of the contraction volume. Now, there's a lot of other hero workouts that you could do on Memorial Day or a holiday to honor our troops, right? And I think that's something that gets overshadowed too. Like when I posted about it, there are people who said like, oh, you're not honoring the troops. And I was like, that's just the easy way for you to cancel out what I'm saying rather than taking responsibility, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't honor the troops, and I don't feel that way at all. What I'm saying is that your coach or your trainer or affiliate owner could be taking bigger precautions. And we're at home for most people. And now like this week, like your gym opened up, and last week and 2 weeks ago, other gyms have been opening up in other states. And yeah, sure, push-ups and air squats may be fine. Running might be fine, but it's the pull-ups that I'm concerned about. And even if you take a level one, any CrossFit coach that has their level one, they go over this in the rhabdo portion about doing too many pull-ups, too many GHD sit-ups, something that could go under long eccentrics, under a lot of load. And that's where it's going to happen, right? So I think doing Murph may be irresponsible at this time because of COVID. And it may be irresponsible in general for gyms who don't plan for it. Now, we all know in CrossFit, we do it every Memorial Day. Why aren't coaches building out 4-week, 8-week program to build people into Murph? Because these people aren't training for the CrossFit Games. So it seems reasonable enough if they're coming to you every day for longevity. Well, you as the coach could decide, well, you're training for longevity, but why not put you through a progression for Murph 3 times a week? build up contractions progressively over time, and then have you do Murph and be successful at it. And that really was like the message I wanted to get across to people for that post, was building better training programs with the thought in mind of what you're going to do as the affiliate owner or the coach, to make sure that you keep people safe and you progress them. And guess what? Like, training people in volume of air squats, push-ups, and pull-ups, if Murph is the goal, is going to make them more fit in the long term. So like, to think like, oh, it's a waste of time to do Murph prep, because I've heard that from coaches and owners. And it's like, no, it's not, because you're going to do that stuff anyways. So just linearize it and build them up to what they need to do. And then there's the other option of, there's so many hero wads out there that people could do. A cool one is Riley. So if you still want to run and have the vest and have a longer time domain, you could run 1.5 miles, 150 burpees, 1.5 miles. And most people are going to be totally fine with that. You could scale down the repetitions of burpees, obviously, or do it with no vest and still partake in something that would be designed for at-home training or quarantine training, whether you're general population or elite. And that is also an option too, that I don't think people are talking about enough. I do see people on Instagram right now doing modifications of Murph, or just choosing another hero wad, which I think is great. But it's just a sense of responsibility in the fitness space that trainers and coaches need to be like thinking about and taking on and growing from, you know. And if you do Murph and your gym does Murph, there's nothing wrong with it. Hydrate, be sensible about it, scale as needed, scale the repetitions. You know, I would just, if you haven't seen a pull-up bar in weeks, just don't do it. Like, yeah. I think that's the other problem. People, because everybody loves the shiny object stuff, or they get excited and get hyped up, and that's cool. And I don't want to stifle that, because motivation and excitement can go a long way, especially in training. But we got to be responsible in the fitness space, especially if we want to call ourselves professionals, which I think a lot of coaches and trainers want to. And the way you can do that is just by having some forethought, being reasonable, and building out better training programs with, you know, the athletes in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was a troop, and I don't think what you said is like disrespecting them at all. Like, that's not what it's about, right? The goal is to get through this and be fine, right? And not have rhabdo. So what you're saying is 100% accurate. Like, you can do Murph, just be smart about it. Like, at our gym, we had like 5 different ways to break it down. And then the coach explains, like, okay, like you said, if you haven't seen a pull-up bar this whole quarantine, like, do not do RX or anything close to that. Just break it up smart. Don't let your ego get in the way. Cause I think that's the biggest issue, is people come in, especially in a class setting, and they see people putting on the vests. They obviously want to be part of that. And they completely disregard that they haven't had a high training intensity for the past 3 months, and they jump right into it. But I think the biggest thing is, you have to ask yourself, are you doing this for longevity, just to look good naked and live a long time, feel good, look good, play good? Or are you doing this to be a competitive CrossFit athlete? And those are 2 completely different things that a lot of people don't understand. And you want to talk a little bit about the differences between training for longevity and training to compete?
Yeah, I think the biggest and easiest way to just blanket statement is, CrossFit athletes have to. Training for longevity, you get to. Now, in both scenarios, you have to be smart about it. But CrossFit athletes have to endure intensity. They have to lift heavy. They have to go on long runs and accumulate mileage and damage to the body to become resilient to it. So then when they're tested on it, they're the fastest and the best at it. Whereas longevity, you have a similar idea, but you don't need to pack everything in a training cycle in a short duration. And then the volume requirement is not as high, because you're not going to test them on anything really. Now, if you have someone that does manual labor, like they dig holes, or you have someone who's in the military, obviously there are things that they're going to be tested on that you need to take into consideration as a coach. So that's an everyday lifestyle, or like firefighters, police officers. You take those people into consideration because they're very active in their job, versus somebody who sits behind a desk that works at Apple, because we both live in the Bay Area. Those are very different things. And the physical tasks that are required of them and asked of them are different. So if you have a police officer or first responder, it's like, okay, so what's the fitness test they test you on? And you would write that into their training program as their template and overarching goal and say, okay, well, they need to be able to do these things when they go in to get tested. Because my dad was Highway Patrol. They have you do annual testing. So you have to make sure that you're physically fit and they have the baselines. So you make sure that they can achieve those goals. They can do their job without being out of breath. They can save lives and all of those things, right? So that's what's asked of them. Someone who sits behind a desk at Apple, they're not asked to save lives. They're not asked to pass the fitness test, even though like arguably for their health insurance, I think they should, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they sit behind a desk and it's really like, okay, so they need to be able to walk up stairs. So they need unilateral leg strength. They're going to sit down, stand up multiple times a day, anywhere from 10 to 30 times a day. Okay. Then they want to play with their kids after work. And who knows what planes and ranges of motion the kids, because if you have a kid that plays soccer, that's going to be very different than the kid that plays baseball versus the kid, you know, and if you're an active parent and you're getting involved in their activities, you also, to some degree, have to be able to do those movement patterns, right? If you want to be a parent that's partaking in that activity versus like the cheerleading parent who sits on the sideline, which that again, like I think that should be the goal for most parents is you want to partake in what your kids are doing. So create a healthy lifestyle that you can teach your kids things and move with them and play with them. That's a huge value. And that's a lot of the clients that we have inside of our gym. And so I stress that all the time. And that should be the goal, right? And you look at those things as a coach or a trainer, whether it's one-on-one or it's group class, and take those into consideration, again, as the template and the skeleton, and then build out your training program around that. And so once you see those movement patterns and the demands of their lifestyle, it's very easy to make a training program. Now for CrossFit athletes, the training program template is what have they done at the games? What have they done at regionals or sanctionals? And what have they done in the open? It's just like if you had an NBA player, like what are the demands of playing basketball? A lot of people right now are watching The Last Dance. I think a lot of people their eyes are being open to, if they've never really followed basketball, how hard that sport is and how much sports specific practice went into the 1998 Bulls, you know? And if you apply that thought process to a CrossFit athlete, well, yeah, they're going to go into the gym most days and they're competing against themselves and against where they need to go. So you give them a workout that's a mixed modal CrossFit style workout, meaning 21-15-9 or an AMRAP or rounds for time with pull-ups, thrusters, or burpees, box jump overs, all the general movements that they are tested on. And you have them go at a percentage base that's going to allow them to increase something, whatever their limiter is. So most CrossFit athletes are oxygen, well, most people in general, but specifically CrossFit athletes, oxygen uptake limited, and then oxygen delivery limited, and then strength limitations. And if you can fix those issues, you can make them a really good athlete. And so you're looking at a lot of different things that have nothing to do with health and well-being. And it's like, how do I get oxygen to go in the body, and then the body use that oxygen to make a muscle contraction? And that's basically what CrossFit is for time. And then are they strong enough to produce force to allow them to express maximal speed and fitness as it is prescribed on a leaderboard, you know, against other human beings? So you're kind of hitting a moving target. But again, back to the general person, like they don't need that. Now, most people do need to learn how to breathe better and have better oxygen uptake, and work on, you know, whether that's meditation, spiritual thought process, and breathing patterns. Yeah, breathing patterns and protocols, and getting oxygen in, because that's so great for down regulation of the system, your stress, just in general, like fear response, things like that. And every human should learn how to do that. But as far as like delivery of oxygen for a general person, if it's okay at delivering oxygen, it doesn't really matter, because they're never going to be at a threshold level where the muscle gets desaturated. Now, if you start desaturating the muscle, then yeah, we're going to need to work on delivery. But again, that's where like CrossFit athletes are way to the right of what needs to happen and why they need to have so many contractions.
Yeah.
And so it's tough, but that's all outside of like program design. That's just on a broad level of like what you're asking someone to do. And then if we get into the deeper dive of like CrossFit as a sport versus training for health and longevity, like training for health, most people should be training, depending on what they're doing, 30 minutes to 90 minutes a day, and depending where they're at, right? And doing a warm up that's full body, get the blood flowing. It doesn't have to be specific. It can be specific to like the next activity. Generally, I like to program it as being specific because then we're ready to go for whatever the next task is. And then you need to press, pull, squat, unilateral, bilateral variances, and keep those really varied for the general population because you don't know what they're going to see in their life. And in a month's time, if you do enough variance and repeat some of that variance, they're going to get enough touch points that they'll get pretty good at it. And then they need to do either a skill, so you get neurological adaptation, so either learning how to do something. Like just last week, I programmed cartwheels for people. And a lot of people were like, why am I doing cartwheels? Well, you do get a lateral stability through the shoulder and you're driving in. And then the most important thing that I'm looking at as a coach is you're learning something that you haven't learned since you were a kid. And it's a good opportunity to retrain movement patterns and just physical culture in your life. And there's nothing wrong with a 20 to 60-year-old human being practicing cartwheels.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, society has said like, oh, only kids in gymnastics do cartwheels, which I think is kind of weird, but we all should be doing. Yeah. And you get the neurological effect, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you would do some type of conditioning or what I call energy system work. If you're a general population person doing high intensity or a CrossFit style workout 2 to 3 times a week is enough. You got to put in some long, what OPEX would call MAP 10, 9, or 8 work, which is long aerobic work, 90 minutes, 60 minutes, and like 30 minutes, and then varying those, because what you can do is you can build out VO2, lactic threshold, and base aerobic training systems. And that's really great to do for obviously cardiovascular, pulmonary, all of that type of health, and push you into your 90s. And then from there, you want to pick something that you enjoy doing that is physical. And that could be anything. But typically, I like to encourage people to choose something that brings their heart rate up to 110 plus beats a minute. You know, if you're like, oh, let's see, axe throwing. Axe throwing is fun. It is physical activity, but it's not going to elevate the system enough to create an adaptation. It's cool for neurological timing, rhythm, and coordination and that type of stuff. So I'm all for it, but like, don't tell me that's exercise. Similar to yoga, I really love yoga, but when people tell me that's exercise, I'm like, it is to an extent, but it has its caveats, and you need a complete training program. So the people who do yoga and that's all they do, I'm like, you have some problems. Like they're huge
missing
holes.
like the 9 other components of
yeah.
fitness. Like they've got flexibility down, but everything else is not.
And I don't want to hate on yoga because again, I love yoga, but it's a tool in a larger training program for general health and fitness, right? Mm-hmm. And then for elite athletes, like they're doing none of that. Elite athletes, they don't have a choice. They're doing snatch, clean and jerk, back squats, unilateral strength, and then they're trying to increase their gymnastics capacity, meaning chest to bars, toes to bars, handstand push-ups, and variants of those, bar muscle up, ring muscle up, and only those movements. And then hard conditioning metcons. And the way the sport is going now is 5 to 10 rounds of anything. Like even if it's an AMRAP or 10 rounds for time, like you're doing that amount of volume or else you're just not competitive. And so it takes time to build people from one spot all the way out to like that highly competitive place. And, you know, at this point, if anyone wants to take on the competitive space and get to a sanctional or get to the CrossFit Games, you're going to spend a year to 2 years of just development before you're even touching the floor of that circuit, and again, like I said, and I'll highlight that like you're doing specific movements all the time that are not outside the range of what CrossFit is asking you to do as a sport. Similar to my basketball analogy, like Michael Jordan wasn't out there playing frisbee, he's bouncing a ball, playing basketball every single day, and everybody on that team is playing basketball to win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time for choosing to do yoga unless like the coach was like, hey, you need to do this to win a championship, right? Then that would be a different story. But I mean, that's, I think, the biggest difference in competitive fitness versus fitness for longevity is that you're doing very specific things versus you have a broad pool of things to choose from, as long as it's hitting certain facets of the human body and physiology that are going to push them out, and you're applying adaptation at the right times.
Mm-hmm. So I want to circle back to something you said and really emphasize it. So you said that for the general population, right, people who are just training for longevity, they should only be doing like super tough metcons 2 to 3 times a week, correct?
Unless you love it, because there are some people out there who love to suffer, and there's a huge value in like enjoying what you're doing, overriding the cause and effect of the physiological benefit or degrade. But yeah, 2 to 3 times a week. Metcon, your for time or AMRAPs, yeah, only 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay. So guys, just to be clear, he's saying that if you truly enjoy suffering through metcons, it's okay to do more than that if you're just training for longevity. But for the average person, you probably don't enjoy suffering through a metcon that much, and you don't need to if you're just general population training for longevity 2 to 3 times a week. And I think this is part of the reason why some people have a negative view of CrossFit, is because they think it's like just intensity, like no matter what, screw form, just fucking go fast. And that's kind of how CrossFit started out, right? That's how they were able to get into like the Navy SEALs and claim that they were the fittest on earth because of that intensity. But now as CrossFit's sort of shifting to more longevity and focusing on like the elderly and the sick populations, and the people who started CrossFit from the beginning are starting to get smart because of experience, and they're realizing that, hey, if we just push intensity, we're going to get injured and we're going to burn out. There's a thing called overtraining, and I made a post like a couple of weeks ago when the gym first started to open. They got closed down again, but I called it like 5 ways to avoid Corona training, because coming back from the quarantine, not really doing much, jumping right back into intense workouts, and that's not the way to go. So what do you think the biggest things to focus on would be if you're just training for longevity and you're coming back into training in a gym setting?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that you said there. I think some of the highlight is like I got my level 1 in 2011, and when I took my level 1, it was MCI, so mechanics, consistency, intensity. Now, when you get level 1, because I had to recert my level 2 a year ago, it's mechanics, consistency, if and only then intensity. So they changed that verbiage in the level 1 and level 2, which is good, right? So they're learning, but that's where I think a lot of that intensity thought process and model has come from. And I don't know if coaches, and that's something that needs to be highlighted, that if you're a coach that's gotten your level 1 a long time ago, or you went and recerted and you just went and recerted and weren't really listening, because it's hard to notice those differences now, because it's just in the verbiage of what they're writing and what they're prescribing as far as across the level 1 certification. So it's important, I think, for coaches to hear that and realize like there has been a shift and a change. And if you're still hammering intensity, you need to take a step back, talk to someone like Mike Fitzgerald or James Fitzgerald, talk to Max El-Haj or myself from Brute, or some of these coaches now that are coaching elite and general population people, who know that like intensity is going to burn you out, it's going to eat you up and destroy your body, and more importantly, your hormones. you're going to destroy your hormones doing too much intensity and not eating correct amounts and not having a nutrition coach and a recovery person for body work. Like,
Sleeping.
yeah, people just, they want to hammer in intensity because intensity, the truth is, it does drive the fastest results. And I can't argue that. Like, I'm going to admit it wholeheartedly. If you want to get a huge extreme shift in your aesthetics and fitness, you go all in and you go hard, you will get a huge change very, very quickly. And that's why CrossFit has worked so well. But the cost benefit of that is so great that I think people need to be discouraged from doing so much intensity. So with all of that said, I hope that people who program design for at-home training during the COVID-19 took into account the volume and intensity that you were doing prior in the gym and rolled that over. And then when you come back, they realize that strength has probably dropped because of so many research studies out there that, like, it's different for everybody. It's hard to say, but 2 to 3 weeks for a really trained person, your maximal absolute strength declines by almost 30%. So that's a huge, so say you back squat 300 pounds. Well, 300, like 30% of 300 is almost 90 pounds, you know? And it's like, that's a huge decline. So you shouldn't be expected after 4 to, depending on how long your gym's been closed, 12 weeks to get back in the gym on back squat PR. My fear is that these coaches are going to have people come in and baseline people. That would be the worst thing to do. Is like, all right, you've been off quarantine. I could see it happening. You've been off quarantine. You're going to come in. We're going to 1 rep max back squat to see where everybody's at. Don't do that. Bring people in and say, all right, guys, we're going to build to a heavy 10, 1 set, self-regulated, perceived rate of exertion of 7 to 9, depending on who you are and your training age. Err on the side of caution. Let's set that baseline. And then over the course of 4 to 8 weeks, decrease the repetitions and increase the volume, meaning the load, and then maybe add more sets depending on how many repetitions you want. Because most people are engaging in CrossFit, you could err on the higher end of reps. If you were a power lifter or Olympic weightlifter, you would go like, you start with them like with a 5x2 and then a 5x3 and then a 5x4 and then a 5x5, and you'd increase their loading and then they'd be up there, and then you could reverse undulate that if you wanted to get them up to their absolute strength. And all that stuff's like out there, like Cal Dietz, great triphasic training method. You could look that up. There's just like collegiate, I think collegiate, looking for collegiate style lifting for general population would be better than like doing a Windler method, which is not as popular in CrossFit anymore, but pretty popular. Or setting an absolute strength 1 rep max baseline and then building people up. I would not do that. I would stay away from that. And you want, so like, yeah, an off season, beginning off season, collegiate weightlifting. And you could email your local like strength and conditioning college. Like, I mean, if you're near Sacramento, you just email University of Sacramento Strength and Conditioning Athletics and say, hey, what's the off-season training program you have the team come in? I guarantee you they'd tell you. You know, if you're like, hey, I'm a CrossFit coach, I got a bunch of people here. What do you guys do when you bring people in? And most of the time they're gonna be, oh yeah, we start with 10s, you know, and they build them down.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't know that if like you've never coached like in a collegiate setting or like a high school setting. But yeah, I think that's a smarter way to do it. Do not 1 rep max people. And like, I wouldn't do
German volume.
You could do like you could do like a Fran, like a burpee Fran with like dumbbell thrusters and burpees, or like with a barbell and burpees because they haven't used a barbell in a long time, and keep that really light. And people like that because it's CrossFit. You know, integrate box jumps because even though people may have been jumping over things, the height of 20 and 24 they may have not had, and that adds a value there. Yeah, you can make it fun and not kill people, you know? So it's tough too. And I think when people talk about like volume training, because you mentioned it, a CrossFit athlete who needs density, they're going to start with 30s, and they're really going to build up to like 50s or 60s with repetitions with anywhere from 4 to 8 movements. So a volume density program design would look like, for an athlete, like 30 deadlifts, 30 handstand push-ups, 30 toes to bar, 30 wall balls, 30 box jump overs. And then the next week it would be 35. And then the next week 40, and then 45, and then 50, and then 55, and then 60. And every single time that would be 4 time. And that's how you would increase their density of how much they could handle. And the goal there would be trying to get them to complete the work in a very similar time domain. So if it takes them 10 minutes the first time, we're looking to try and only increase by like 2% the next time as the reps go up. And if you increase by 5 reps each time, typically from what I've learned over coaching a lot of people and getting a lot of data, it's a 2% increase in rate of movement travel for 5 repetition increase in whatever design that you're creating. But that's just numbers I have, and that could be completely wrong because the pool of people that I have may be different than the pool of people that another coach has, you know? So, but yeah.
So I feel like we've been talking a lot about like what you can do if like you're a coach or an affiliate owner to better help your athletes. What about for the clients or the athletes specifically? Like if their coach isn't a professional coach and is maybe just doing this for shits and giggles, you know, they're not really taking it seriously and they don't know all this stuff. They haven't been studying it. What can the athletes be doing to make sure that they're training smartly as they're coming back into the gym?
That's a hard question, and I feel strongly about it in this way. If you're a coach or a gym owner and you're not doing your work to learn or grow and be the best that you can be, you need to get out of the industry. And that's how I feel. Is that going to happen? I don't
Agreed.
know. There's no regulators there. We don't get a state board, you know, in each state. Do I want that type of regulation? Probably not. Have I met some really great strength coaches in the collegiate setting that I'm like, oh, you should not be coaching these people, but for whatever reason it's working? Yes, you know, and that's hard because I see great creativity in training programs sometimes that go against what you would think would work based on scientific models and testing and anecdotal evidence. But if we don't allow people to try this, we're not going to get that creativity. So I don't want to lose that either. But I do want people who are in this space to take it serious. Because for myself and my wife, especially, like, you know, we've owned an affiliate for a long time. She coaches nutrition. And like just yesterday, we had a member who started a podcast and we listened to her podcast and my wife was in tears. And this member's lost 70 pounds, right? Through smart training, good coaching, quality nutrition. And like, we love what we do. And I'm the first to admit, like, some days I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, this is what I think. This is what I have learned. This is what I think I know. This is not working on paper. You know, and sometimes you're just like, well, let's just throw paint on the wall and see what sticks. And that has to happen. And I think sometimes coaches are doing that. But if you don't care enough, you're never going to get someone to lose 70 pounds. You're never going to get to hear their story on their personal podcast of how you've changed their life. You know, and I think there are a lot of great coaches out there who are doing this. That's why you hear the stories in CrossFit. But there are also a lot of coaches out there who are not doing this and you don't hear those stories and they're giving us a bad name. And there's a reason why Morning Chalk Up has something to write about, or why some Instagram person has something to complain about, or why I get to get on my Instagram and do a thing about Murph, because you have people acting irresponsibly. And I think if we can have the people who believe that they're doing their best and trying, like myself, and that was kind of the point of the post too, was to come out and say how I feel, give you answers, give you suggestions, and start the conversation. And if someone has a really good argument, please let me know, because I can learn from that argument. You know, the only way we truly learn in life is through disagreement and not through agreement. Like, you learn nothing when people agree with you. So if we can disagree on stuff in a productive way, in a positive way, then I think we're going to level up the fitness industry as a whole. And the people who don't want to disagree in a positive way and be a productive member of the fitness space, they need to get out. And those are the people I'm talking about. The people that don't care, like, well, I'm here for my CrossFit gym or my gym, and we're going to do this thing. And I don't care about energy systems. And I don't care because doing something is better than nothing. I do believe that statement. Yes, doing something is better than nothing, but you own this building or program or online coaching thing that you can build into whatever you want it to be. And guess what? People will still pay money. You'll still have a living, but you get to change their life how you see fit based on you continually learning and pushing and growing and being able to admit, like, oh, I was wrong. Like the other day, I was telling my wife, like, man, when I owned the affiliate in 2013 and 2014, and we're out there doing Murph, I look back and I think about the video I made. I'm like, 2013, 14, Todd would have told this 2020 Todd to go F himself.
Yeah.
We're doing Murph, and like, so I get it. I've been there, but you have to go through that growth process. And if you don't, then you're just going to be that 2013, 2014 Todd, and you're not helping anyone.
Yeah.
And that's where like I don't think it's a member's responsibility to take on the training aspect of it. Members love it too. From my personal experience, we try to educate as much as we can about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And the information is out there. Like I've said some stuff in classes where members go home and Google it and learn about it and then come back and talk to me about it. And they're like, that was so cool. Like that's like one of my favorite things. And then it's even more fun because the days you slip up because you're either like misspeaking or you're not thinking right, or you're just like throwing shit on the wall. Members who've done their research because you've encouraged them to will hold you accountable to being better. So again, it's not really the members or athletes' responsibility. It's great if they do, but you need to encourage them. And if that's podcasts you listen to or books you're reading, and if they care, they'll seek out knowledge. If they don't, then they won't. And either way, you're still putting out a good quality message as the coach. And so that's where it is. And if you're a person who wants to learn and your coach isn't giving it to you, don't worry about it. I'm sure that coach is doing a good job and they're trying their best. You could pick up a book, read it, learn it, and say, hey, I really read this book. It was super cool. Or I listened to this podcast. I think you should listen to it and give it to your gym owner. Because I guarantee you, if they're in a growth mindset, they're going to listen to that piece of thing or read it or whatever, and they're going to implement it in a couple of days or the next week or whenever, they get that spark and excitement to do it. And I think we're all in a nature of learning if we're open to it. So, but again, it falls back on the coach and the owners 100%.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's becoming less of an issue now. I think at the beginning of CrossFit, a lot of coaches and gym owners kind of just saw it as a way to get in and make some money and kind of do it as a hobby on the side. But I think now the coach is becoming more professionalized. People are realizing that, okay, this can actually be like a full career. And it's like back in the day that didn't really used to be an option. Like it was, if you wanted to get into fitness, you were like a strength and conditioning coach for a college, or I don't really know what else.
Personal trainer for 24-hour fitness.
Personal trainer, basically just selling your time.
I did that for 2 years.
Yep. And now I think CrossFit coaches are getting better. And like you mentioned, it's all about learning. As long as you're willing to learn and admit your mistakes. Like, I don't care about being right. There's things that I say that if I was proven wrong tomorrow, that's great. I just care about providing the correct information. And like you said, I was the same way. If I would have gone back to younger Taylor, I would have been like, fuck you, like, shut up. And you just have to let go of your ego, right? Because your ego is going to tell you, no, I'm right. Like I've done the research, like this is correct. So yeah, if you let your ego get in the way, it's going to be hard to learn anything. But yeah, you're 100% right. It is not the member's responsibility. It's on the coach. So yeah, that's a good point. Is competing in CrossFit healthy?
No.
Good.
I love that question. Um,
And
I
it's funny
tell,
because people think like they see these athletes and they're like, holy shit, like they are like the epitome of health. When in
yeah, no.
reality, yeah, it's not quite like that.
So,
So
so there are aspects of elite fitness that you can manipulate to use on the general population that can definitely create some really positive change in someone's lifestyle, aesthetics, feeling. Um, a lot of that stuff is actually the mental side of it. I think there are a lot of things about competition, period, if you really dive into it. And a good book is Matt Fitzgerald's How Bad Do You Want It?
mm,
It's
yeah,
marathon runners. It's really good. So that mental stuff is huge. And I think you only get that, even if you read about it, but you were never an elite athlete of some type, you're not going to fully understand what they're going through until you know, reach that stage. So you can get pieces of it, but it's really challenging to get the full picture of it if you've never competed at a very high level. And that's just the unfortunate truth. But as far as their training protocols, no, I tell athletes, I'm like, it's just a matter, it's not like if you get hurt, it's like when you get hurt. So that's the
yeah,
first thing. Then the second piece is you, every day, and I watch athletes every day. And my wife's a competitive athlete also. She's been a sanctionals, she qualified for 3 sanctionals this year for 2020 season. And she goes in the gym and just like murders herself. And now it's kind of funny because I'll put on my Instagram, I'll put just like, oh, when you have one piece and your wife's doing 20, like
yeah. I saw
she's
that
in there for
yesterday.
like 4 hours, and I'm like done because I just do it now. I love CrossFit. I love, like, I'm one of the people that I could do not every day, but probably 4 to 5 times a week. I could do a high intensity piece and enjoy it. Um, but she's got 2 different intensity pieces, huge volume pieces for gymnastics, like weightlifting. This morning she did 45 minutes on the assault bike, like just stuff that I used to do when I was competing but would not do anymore.
Hmm.
And it it beats you up. It's not fun. It is a job, and it is greatly unhealthy because you do have to sleep 10 to 12 hours. And if you don't sleep 10 to 12 hours, your body's not recovering. So that's already eating a huge chunk into your day. So if you're trying to be productive and have a full-time job, I don't know if sleeping 10 to 12 hours is going to help that. And
Yeah,
then you walk around, like, you feel good training because you're moving, but getting up out of chairs, watching movies for a long time, going up and down stairs, like those types of things that I get feedback from, you're done. Like, they're like, oh, I don't feel great. So like functioning in normal life, they're like, this is not comfortable.
hmm,
I'm friends with Adrian Conway. He works for Brute. They Wasatch Brutes beat CrossFit Mayhem in 2017 at the CrossFit Games. Big victory, put a stop in mayhem, you
yeah.
know.
That was crazy.
Got to put a shout out. But Adrian was like, when I was training for that, I couldn't even sit down because my knees would swell up. And it's like, that's not normal. That should
Yeah,
not happen. And if that's happening to you, you're either going too hard, doing something wrong, or you have a severe injury. And at that moment in time, all Adrian cared about was beating mayhem, which they did. And now, like, Adrian's probably never going to compete again. He trains about 60 to 90 minutes a day. And him and I work out virtually sometimes. Like, you know, he's just fit and having a good time. And so he's lucky that he was able to come out of competitive CrossFit, you know, unscathed. And sports of any nature, really, like if you get out of a professional sport and you don't have anything seriously wrong with you, man, you got lucky. Like,
yeah.
so
Nobody's playing football to be healthy.
yeah, you're playing to win. And I
Yeah,
think that's what people don't realize. And whether you're Matt Frazier, or you're somebody that no one knows about at a sanctional, you're playing to win.
hmm,
You're not you're not doing it for an experience.
yeah,
You know, the experiences will come and that's all in there. But like realistically, if that's not your mindset, like, I'm out here to win, I'm out here to train hard and kill myself every day because I want to be victorious, you might want to reevaluate what you're doing, because at the end of the day, once you go to a sanctional, like it's just like anything. You're only as good as your last sanctional, right? You're only as good as your last CrossFit Games. And once that's over, once the weekend's done, what are you left with? So you better hope that you knew going into it, you were there to win. And that win might not be first place. It might be like, I'm going to go into every event like it's my last event and do my best. And then you have like little process goals within that goal. And if you make all those goals and all those process goals, then you won. And that should be it. That should be the weekend. And then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why you're doing it. It's for that glimmer in time to put yourself in that position. And in that process, like you might step out, like they had the zigzag sprint, the CrossFit Games. And they run down, turn around, run back, go through 3 cones. You know how easy it would be to tear an ACL going through those 3 cones?
Yeah.
And your CrossFit Games would be over like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you better be damn sure that you know why you're out there running that hard and that fast and like on the verge of injury, you know? And if you don't have that straight, man, good luck.
Yeah. you got to have your why for sure. But yeah, you brought up How Bad Do You Want It? I've read that book and I actually thought about it today on the last run of Murph, because I was hurting and I was like, I remembered that How Bad Do You Want It? It's all in your head. Your body's pretty much always going to be able to push longer than your mind. Your mind's going to want to give up. It's essentially what the book is talking about. And I just thought of that in my head. I was like, I am going to set a PR today, so I better pick it the fuck up. And that's my ego talking, because I'm not trying to compete. I just wanted to get a faster time. It was for my ego, like for sure. But yeah, I can relate to the like competing in CrossFit not being healthy. Not that I was ever a competitive athlete or even close, but I was training to get there. And for the last like 2 years, I would train for 3 to 4 hours a day. In Saudi Arabia, I had the time to train for basically all day long. Right. And like you said, sleep has to be a priority. I was sleeping 9 to 10 hours and training. That was basically my day: eat, sleep, train. And that was it. And I didn't feel great. Like, as you know, I got a couple knee injuries while I was there. I was just feeling burnt out because my training volume was so high. Yeah. And then I realized, I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to actually compete in CrossFit at like a high level. Like, I would still love to go do a local competition. I think they're really fun.
But yeah, you're a good athlete too. So,
and that's a completely different level of training. Like training to go to a sanctional is different than your weekend throwdown, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, if you're walking around and your knees hurt when you sit down or you go upstairs, or your back is always hurting and you don't want to compete in the sport of CrossFit, then your training is probably too intense. Right.
Yeah. Or it's the caveat to that is like, I think, maybe think of it. There are people who their knees hurt and their backs hurt because they're not training. So like, you might want to evaluate why. Like, so like elite athletes, they know why they're hurt. Like all the time, they know why they're hurt. I think there are some people who will get hurt and not know why, or some people will enter a training program that was above, it wasn't where they're at, right? Because most training programs for general population and health and fitness need to meet the person where they're at and then just slightly pull it out away from them, right? Whereas competitive fitness or high athletics, it needs to be way far out from their capabilities and they grow into that spot. And like, that's kind of what you explained when you were in Saudi Arabia. Is it's like, I wrote a program that's going to pull you way far out. But if I meet you where you're at, well, we're not going to get any adaptation, right? Well, when you step in a CrossFit gym and you're just looking for health, most of the time, it's going to be way far out of your zone. And even if they scale it, the point of scaling is to meet the intensity as if you were an elite athlete and intended that intensity, right? So like, when coaches write programs for their gym, they should be, if they're following CrossFit model, they write a program that is for the best, and you scale to the rest with the intention of meeting the stimulus that workout intended on being originally, right? So even though you're not going RX, you're getting an adaptation that an elite athlete would get. And that's where the issue lies in like the injury aspect, is that it needs to be in CrossFit. This is what I've been arguing for a long time. And as an affiliate owner, one-on-one training is a better model to actually produce better health and fitness and longevity. Just talking to my wife about this, I was like, yeah, because we have another nutrition client and she wants to build muscle. And I coach her in our affiliate and she comes in and does the affiliate training program. But I was like, that's where I'm like, she needs a one-on-one coach, and we have coaches who can do that. But most of the time people don't want to pay the money for it. And all of these other problems that arise have nothing to do with like, really, it's like you need this one-on-one program because you have specific areas that need to be fixed. And that might be one piece of your training a day. And it's going to be sandwiched in appropriately with the CrossFit class or another training program that's progressed out. And like people don't like that because they're like, oh, it should all be individualized. Well, that's where we run into, we don't vary by kind, we vary by degree. And that's what a one-on-one coach does, is you have to vary it to the degree of the person. Now, the kind part can be different depending on the goal. If your goal is to be better at weightlifting, you need to snatch and clean and jerk. But if your goal isn't to be better at weightlifting, you only need to snatch and clean and jerk for neurological effects. But you could jump, you could run, you could sprint and get all those adaptations. But if you don't have something written that way for you, then you're going to end up just beating yourself into the dirt and getting broken and then going, oh, my knee hurts, oh, my back hurts. When I sit down, CrossFit's not for me. Maybe CrossFit is not the problem. The problem is the application to you and your personal system.
Yeah.
And so that's where like evaluating why you're hurt, whether you're an elite athlete or a general population person, is very important, and taking a lot of things into consideration. So your job, your training program, your recovery, your stress levels, meaning like your relationship stress, your job stress, your house stress. If your house is dirty and it stresses you out because you don't have time to clean it, that's going to apply a load to the system that you're unaware of. And then that can create injury, physical injury, from being stressed out that your house is messy because you have no time to clean it.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get rid of that stress, hire a maid, even though it's going to cost you money, but you didn't have time to do it anyways. So you need to spend money to alleviate that stress, so then you don't get injured, or you don't, have something worse happen to you because of mental health issues, right? And that's a weird example. I don't know how that came to me, but it is a true example of like little stressors that we don't even realize that contribute to pains in the body. And training could be the icing on the cake, or training could be the help that changes all of that. Yeah. So it just depends, and I think it's important for people to evaluate why they're hurting and take all of their aspects into consideration.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I left Saudi Arabia, because I knew that I wasn't making the impact that I could. And so because a lot of people who come into CrossFit, especially there, they had horrible sleep schedules and they were wondering why they weren't getting any better. I was like, guys, you have to sleep and you have to eat this way. Like they were eating crap, like getting coffee like right before they went to bed. And I was like, it's like, it's not training related. You probably shouldn't even be coming into the gym until we fix your sleep. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I left, is to create like this holistic approach, is everything is connected. So let's talk a little bit about scaling, because like you said, the proper CrossFit affiliate should be programming for the best and then scaling for the rest, as long as they explain it correctly. But a lot of people think that scaling is like, it makes them seem weaker or something because it's a hit on their ego. They're like, well, this guy's doing RX, I want to do that too. So you want to talk about the importance of scaling to your ability level and not worrying about what everybody else is doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, you explained it, scaling to your ability level, not worry about what anyone else is doing. But I wish they would change the word scaling, honestly.
What do you think a better term would be?
I've been through this conversation multiple times. I have no idea. It's whatever you feel is going to hurt your ego the least amount. Yeah. So whatever that word is, great. Because really, scaling came from CrossFit as a tool for CrossFit coaches to meet the needs of the individual at that moment in time so that they could progress appropriately. CrossFit is not a progressive training program. They don't teach you linear progression. They don't teach you how to progress out volume. They don't even teach you how to teach skills. Arguably, they have all these resources on their website, on their YouTube, and they used to have like the CrossFit gymnastics course, and Kelly Starrett used to do the mobility course, and they had that for a while. Then they put some of the stuff online, and then so like being a CrossFit coach, it's super disheveled as far as how you're going to get your information, right? So if we just go on the level one and we ignore all the other stuff, I am privy to all these other things, and someone will bring up the argument, well, I have the weightlifting cert and I have blah, blah. I get it. I've done those things too. But let's just take level one, level two. They teach you how to cue and correct. They teach you how to spot the flaw. They teach you how to manage groups. And they teach you the 9 fundamental movements of CrossFit. They teach you the zone diet, and they teach you about rhabdo. And in the program design, they want you to do constantly varied, long, short, heavy, couplets, triplets, and chippers. So based on that model, the other piece is scaling it down to meet people where they're at. And they also movement selection, they teach you not to double up on movements, which is great, but that lies in the constantly varied. Because if you're doing push press one day and then handstand push-ups the next day and then thrusters the next day, you're not constantly varying anything. You basically just did 3 of the same movements in a row, right? So that lies how they keep things without having crossover movement selection and redundant movement patterns that could create injury. So they're doing a lot of good things. Like when I explain all that, it sounds great. Where the problem is there's no progression, there's no teaching of skills, and there's no way to have someone in your gym who has never done a back squat progression in their entire life. They're going to come in for 5x5 CrossFit back squat day. And that's what we're doing today. And this is where like companies like Active Life have made a ton of money, because they know that CrossFit gyms are doing this, because that is the prescription that they're teaching you and certifying you on. And again, there's nothing wrong in that. There's a lot of good things there that I highlighted. So the scaling portion is how you would take somebody who's doing a 5x5 back squat and have never squatted today, how you're going to give them a PVC pipe and squat to a med ball. That scaling option is, okay, we're going to teach them how to squat. Now, what if I'm the coach for that 9:30 a.m. class and I did that with that person, and then tomorrow we have a different coach at 9:30 a.m. who hasn't met that athlete, and then they scale inappropriately, or they don't progress them off of that progression, right? So like, let's say we're squatting to a ball with a PVC pipe on our back, which CrossFit would be like, that's a great scaling option. Good job. Know your progressions. Well, now I'm not coaching them the next day, and say we're doing wall balls, and they're doing wall balls, and that coach is like, oh yeah, take the 14-pound ball, or 20-pound ball, and just go over there and throw it at the 9 or 10-foot target. And they're like, oh, you need to scale it? Okay, well, we're not going to scale the range of motion, because we don't want to ever scale the range of motion, because we learned that in level 1. So here's a 10-pound ball. Oh, it's too far for you to throw? Okay, we're gonna throw it at the wall, and just go as high as you can. Well, you can now see the problem there of like the scaling. And that's why people, I think, actually unknowingly get upset by scaling, because CrossFit coaches are not equipped to scale appropriately and progress appropriately. And that's not their fault, really, from level 1, if we're only talking about somebody who's been certified from level 1. Now, as you go down your career as a coach, 1, 2, 3 years into your coaching career, you better be learning education and follow up and having these conversations with people. So like, you could take that person who was back squatting to a ball with a PVC pipe, you then work in some unilateral work so they can strengthen their glutes and hamstrings, so that way they can do a bilateral movement into a unilateral movement with load. Then you progress them to a training bar, and then a barbell, and then the weights on the bar, and then you build them up and up and up until they have absolute strength through the back squat. The wall ball person, you start them with a 10-pound ball. You might just have them toss it over their head, and then you measure how high they can throw the ball. And over time, you get them to throw it higher and higher and higher based on the measurement. It's like, oh, last week you were throwing it 6 feet high. This week, let's try to throw it 7 feet high. And you build out an arbitrary progression, but you made the progression so that they can go to let's just say 14-pound ball at 9 feet, or a 20-pound ball at 10 feet. And now they're doing CrossFit. But all of that could take 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the person, to get them just to take a med ball and throw it to a 9-foot or 10-foot target at the prescribed loading. And
People want
so,
it too fast.
yeah. And so that's where I'm like, scaling, I don't like the word. It's got holes, but if you follow CrossFit prescription and you do your best, it's going to work over time for somebody and it's going to change their life. So I don't want to
Yeah.
hate on it entirely. I do think it could be done better. And people need to just accept that, like, we all have a different starting place. Because if we didn't, why is there rankings in the open? We'd all be first place in the open. And I think that's where the ego gets hit by athletes, is like, you don't realize that here's where you are. And yes, you want to go here, but if you don't accept that you're here, then you'll never be able to get to go over there.
Exactly.
And that's the hardest part. And so that's why I don't like the word scaling and the problems with scaling, but because it's more like, this is your path. Like, we need to really show you your starting position and show you the path, how you're going to get to the top of the mountain for you and what that looks like. And everybody's path may be a little bit different. You might not even be on the same fucking mountain, like some people's might be like in the Antarctic. I don't know, and they have a whole nother set of problems on the path that they have to follow to get to the top.
Yeah.
Whereas I might be in the Mojave Desert, like, so it's so individualized. And that's where, like, scaling is going to be the best thing we can do in a CrossFit setting. But as a coach, you have to step back for a second and realize there's more you can do. It's just, how are you going to do that? What's the gym going to allow, yeah. And what you want to do as a coach. Like, do you even want to go down that road? I'm perfectly fine, like, having conversations about individuality of CrossFit training and fitness training. It does frustrate people because once they start realizing how much work has to go into the physical body, they're like, I quit. And they're not wrong. It's a lot of work, but man, you only have one body, right? And everyone says that all the time. And I think not everyone really understands that stuff.
Yeah. Your body and the way you move right now is different than the person next to you. They might have started a month earlier. Like, so you should never compare yourself to anybody next to you. Just focus on where you're at, what feels good for you. Obviously, form comes first, mechanics consistently, which you can do that time and time again. Then and only then increase the intensity.
Yep.
All right. Let's wrap it up. I want to bring it back to rhabdo, just to end on, because I've had rhabdo before, not like hospitalized rhabdo,
Right.
but I think
you had the Coca-Cola P.
No, yeah, not quite that
pains. Bad. Oh, not that bad.
Not that bad. I think it was like 3 years ago, Murph. It was after I was doing like strictly Olympic lifting for at least 6 months. And then Memorial Day comes around, and being a CrossFit athlete, I was like, obviously I'm going to do Murph. That's what people do on Memorial Day. And I'm going to do it RX because, I fucking can. And I did it RX. I felt fine during the workout. But then next morning, lo and behold, I got the T-Rex arms. Couldn't straighten them for like a week. And my lats too was just like painful to the touch. And so that basically ruined my whole week of doing anything really. I could barely move. So I just want to emphasize, if your training has not been at that level of intensity, if you have not seen a pull-up bar, if you have not been doing weighted push-ups, don't jump into this RX, or don't jump into any training for that matter, RX. Remember where you're at the time. Don't think you can hop right back in from where you left off before the quarantine started.
Yeah, make the workout, and people are already going to do it, but this goes for any special event or hard workout. You got to make the workout suit what you've been doing in training. And if it doesn't look that way, then you're not actually testing, you're just training another day. And I look at Murph, and I said this in my video, like Murph is a workout that they did at the CrossFit Games twice. It's a test of fitness. It should be viewed that way. It's a way to honor the troops. And if you really want to like do that, spend the next year training for Murph so you can do it RX. And like I said in the very, very beginning, like there's a lot that can come out of doing pull-ups, push-ups, and air squats and running. You can change your body and your aesthetics. Now apply a weighted vest, learn all those skills, learn how to kip appropriately, like all of that stuff, and spend the whole year progressing and training. And next Memorial Day, 2021, come and crush it. And, do it sub 50 minutes, which I think is a respectable time, like male, female. And for like general people, if you're an elite athlete, you got to go sub 40,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that should be a greater message, and that encompasses all of your training, is that should be it. Like there's a goal that you have, and whatever that goal is, define it, create little metrics along the way, check in with yourself, test, retest, and then build new stuff. And if you're a long time, like you're like, I want to live till I'm 80. If you're feeling better than you did a month ago, that's good enough as a metric. Just to make sure you're communicating that with your coach and what that looks like and how you're measuring it for yourself. And arbitrary feelings are just as good as numerical data. I like numerical data, but there's a good, like you can use a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being you're so fit, you're ready to crush it, and 1 being like you're almost dead, and use that as your barometer for your training. Rate it every day. Look back at the trends. If you have more +7 days, you're doing a good job. If you got a bunch of days that are 3s and 4s, you might want to reevaluate what you're doing.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. All right. Last question, real quick. What are your thoughts on learning to kip the pull-ups before you can do a strict pull-up?
So like you alluded to before, everyone just wants to do the thing. Yep. And so as a CrossFit affiliate owner and coach, like I tell everyone, yeah, we're going to teach you how to do the thing, because I know that's what you want to do, and I'm not going to hold you back from that, because like you'll just quit and not want to come to the gym. But when they want to know, I like James Fitzgerald's test of being able to do 3 strict pull-ups with a 3-second eccentric. Because the data he has on that, it shows that you have enough shoulder strength that the chance of injury is significantly low. Mm-hmm. So 3 strict pull-ups with a 3-second eccentric in controlled in a hollow body position, you're good to go, in my opinion. And you can learn to kip and do other gymnastics skills and things of that nature. So you might be really far from that. I might say that and someone's like, I can't do that, and I've been doing CrossFit for 3 years. Probably true in the case, and that's okay. Start doing strict pull-ups. Easiest way to do that is just do max unbroken, rest, and then build out a progression from there, and just add a pull-up each week. Mm-hmm. And like realistically, I say easy, that's probably like the only way. You could get creative and do weighted stuff, and you can do feet elevated ring rows, but all of that's just creating variance of scapular stability, strength, and lat strength. And you want to create variance, but you do need a staple that stays the same and stays consistent, so you can linear progress that over time. But boom. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I think if you can do those 3 with 3-second eccentric, you can learn high skill gymnastics, still focusing on your strict strength. Yeah. You don't want to let that go. Like if you're a CrossFit 100%. Athlete, strict handstand push-ups with a nice tight body line, don't bend at the hip, strict pull-ups, strict toes to bar. I think that gets neglected a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of lat strength that can come from that. So strict muscle up, I would say learn to strict muscle up before you kip muscle up, because it helps with the turnover. If that's really challenging, seated L-sit from the floor muscle up is a great skill to learn and always do. Even if you can do like 30 unbroken, I still have elite athletes to this day do L-sit ring muscle ups, because it's just such a fundamental foundational strength skill that you need to continue to do, and like not stop doing the basics just because you can do advanced stuff.
I agree. You're never too good to go back to the basics, and nobody in history was ever good enough to skip the basics. So
Yeah.
don't try to just go on the rings and flail around getting the muscle up if you can't even do your strict pull-ups on the bar. Well, thank you so much for hopping on and spreading some wisdom to the people, hopefully reducing the amount of injuries. Fingers crossed on that. No cases of rhabdo because it sucks.
Yeah.
Anything you want to leave them with?
No, that was good. I thank you for your time. I hope people listen to this and get something out of it. I think that's really where I'm at in my life right now, is just spreading knowledge and having conversation. It's going to make people better. Be open-minded. I think that's, leave people with being open-minded, and don't try to cancel out ideas just because they don't jive with you.
Yeah.
If you hear something that you disagree with, that might be an opportunity to take a moment, take a step back, and really think about it, because that might be your biggest growth point. And I've missed those opportunities in my life because I just have not listened to people, and that's a good takeaway.
Words of wisdom from the wise Todd Wise. All right,
And
where
how
can
many
people
times
find
I've
you?
heard that. Coach_Todd Wise on Instagram. We're going to be having a training program that developed because of an idea from COVID, is wisemovement.com. That's going to be coming out soon. That's more for group and structured training. So if you're somebody who is in a CrossFit affiliate and you want a little bit more structure and progression, and not so much constantly varied functional fitness executed at high intensity, that'll be for you. If you're looking to do one-on-one training, brute strength training for competitive athletes, I work for Brute Strength. So it's brute.strength on Instagram and brutestrengthtraining.com.
There we go. All right.